Hello, it's Rob here for the Mantic Weekly. I'm behind the camera this week because I thought we'd do something a little bit different. As you know, we're due to release The Walking Dead All Out War very shortly, and as well as the core set, you can also pick up the Prelude to Woodbury set. Now the difference here is that Prelude to Woodbury is designed for solo play, which is very different to the core set, which is obviously designed for PvP with the zombies getting in the way as well. And the Prelude to Woodbury is all about this guy here, Brian Blake. Now that name may not be familiar to some of you, but if I said the Governor, hopefully then you might recognise him. And what we've got in this set is the story of Brian Blake, the Governor, before he becomes the kind of notorious character he is in the comics later on. And like I said, it is designed mainly for solo play, although obviously you can use all the components in the core set as well. So today for the Mantic Weekly, I'm going to play through one of the scenarios in this solo play game. Hopefully I'll win, otherwise it would be quite depressing for everyone watching, and we'll see what goes on. So that's the end of the introduction, and we'll come back in a minute to talk about the setup and some of the differences between the games. Okay, so here we are at the start of turn 1, and I'll give you a little bit of background to explain what's going on here. So Brian is not yet the villainous leader he will become. He lives in the shadow of his brother Philip, who has led the group to Wiltshire Estates, an upper-class gated community. Philip has sent Brian out to explore the streets and come back with something they can use to survive. So here, unlike the PvP game in the core set, where it's you against another group of survivors, it's Brian on his own against the walkers you can see here. And what he's got to do is he's got to collect the 5 supply tokens dotted around the board, and then he's got to get off this board edge here. So obviously it's a little bit different to the core set. And if we take a look at Brian's card now, you can see, although he's only just starting out, he's still pretty powerful. He's got a white dice for melee, white dice for shoot, 2 red dice for defense. He's got 5 health, and he's also got a special rule which is tenacious. When Brian loses his last wound, roll the sheriff's dice, and on the sheriff's badge he remains in play standing with 1 wound. So that's a little bit like Carl's lucky hat. And he's also armed with a Beretta, which adds 1 white dice to a range attack roll, and it's also reliable. So if you fail the ammo roll when you've got a headshot, you can re-roll it. Another slight difference is, unlike the normal game where we play on a 20 by 20, here we're playing on a 15 by 15. Now that makes it really claustrophobic, so you've got to think about all the decisions. So, yep, let's get started, and we'll be back now with turn 1 proper. Right, so here we go with turn 1. Now I've got 2 supply tokens very close to me here. Unfortunately though, they are just out of my 4-inch sneak range. That one is 2. So that means if I ran, I would make noise, which would either attract that walker or that walker towards me. But I'm going to be bold during this playthrough. I'm going to think like the Governor, and I think the Governor would go all out and shoot this walker here. Now because he's got a Beretta, as I was saying earlier, he'll get 1 for his normal shoot and then 1 extra for the Beretta. Now I'm going to roll these off camera, but I won't cheat. And I get 3. And then the walker, because there's no cover, gets 1 red dice. Ugh, and gets 2. However, I've still won, which means it's pushed back and laid prone. However, that does cause mayhem. So it means the threat tracker goes up by 1, and then all walkers within 10 inches shamble 6 inches towards Brian. Now luckily that one will hit that barrier there, and when they hit a barrier they stop. And it's the same for that one there. When it hits the car, it will stop. Now that was my first action, which means I've got another action. And I think I'm going to sneak up now closer to that equipment to get it next turn. Now just like the normal game, we would now measure any kill zones to see if Brian is in the kill zone of a walker, and that's the beauty of the kind of solo play and the kill zones, is obviously you can play it by yourself because the walkers move automatically either through noise or through the kill zone or through the events. So I'm not in the kill zone of any of the walkers, which means I move on to the event phase, and I've got Pandemonium. So that adds 1 to the threat level, which takes it to 2. I'm still on all quiet, and it says roll 1 white dice and move that many eligible walkers towards the nearest survivor. So the solo play is a little bit different. The cards have been written slightly differently, and you'll see in the top corner there it says solo on them. And it means that I can actually make the decisions myself. So rather than like the kind of core game where both players are using the walkers to their advantage to move them towards the enemy, in this one I need to kind of be careful and move them away from me. So I get to roll 1 white dice and move that many eligible walkers towards the nearest survivor. So fingers crossed for a 1 here. Yes, I did get a 1. So the walker will move 6 inches. They will shamble directly towards me. And I think I am going to move this one here. Now because it's already on the barrier, the walker will shuffle around and then unfortunately will come towards me, ready for the melee phase. So now we have the melee phase, because Brian is unfortunately now in melee combat with this walker. The threat level goes up by 1, now on 3, and the walker will attack. So I get 1 white dice in melee, or 2 red for defense, whereas the walker will get 1 red dice. Again, I'm going to be bold, I'm going to think like the governor, and I'm going to have a melee attack. So I'm going to roll them both together, again off camera, but I won't cheat. So the walker got 1 and Brian got 1. Now in this situation the survivor always wins, which means the walker is pushed back an inch. So not great, but at least I didn't take any wounds. So now it's the end phase, and we just need to check if this walker here stands up, and you roll the sheriff's dice. On the badge it stands up, on the blank it doesn't. So again I'm going to roll it off camera. And I got, oh no. Fortunately I got the sheriff's dice, which means that walker stands up. So yeah, it's not looking great for Brian at the end of turn 1, so we'll see what happens in turn 2. Turn 2 now, and unfortunately because this walker stood back up, that's kind of ruined my plan. So I've got a couple of options here. I can either go towards this one, the supply token in the car, or I can try and leap over this barricade and get that one. Now because Brian isn't a runner, that means if I want to get over a barricade I need to roll the sheriff's dice, and on a badge he will do it, on a blank he won't. So again, I'm going to think like the governor here, I'm going to be bold. I'm going to try and jump over that barrier, because then it's within my sneak range to get the supply token. Okay, so first of all I move to here. Now I'm going to roll the badge, and I do it. So I gracefully leap over, and then I use my next action to search the supplies, and I get ammo reload. So this is an attachment ranged weapon. Discard this card as an action to reload the attached weapon. And then when you have to reload is if you've scored a headshot when shooting, and if you roll the sheriff's dice you may end up having no ammo. So that's really handy to help me sure I've got lots of ammo to shoot the walkers. So that doesn't make any noise, so it means we're on to the event phase, and first we check the kill zones. Now I'm a bit worried about this one here because it may just, no, whoa, I am just out by a few, and then no, I'm still out of that kill zone there. That was a close call. I thought Brian was done for then. So now I check the events, and this is the hunger. So I immediately do +1 threat, so we're now on low threat. And low threat, move 1 eligible walker towards the nearest survivor. So again, I get to choose which walker I'm going to move. Now I don't want to move this one. I obviously don't want to move this one because it will shamble 6 inches and will end up in base to base. So I think I'm going to actually move this one here. And luckily it will shamble directly into the car and stay there. So at the end of turn 2, we've collected one of the supply tokens, which means there's still 4 left. I need to try and get rid of this one. Probably try and sneak away from this one here. So yeah, we'll see what happens in turn 3. Turn 3, and I think, unfortunately, I'm not going to think quite like the governor for this one. After promising to be bold, I'm actually going to be a little bit sneaky. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sneak up next to that supply token there and use my next action to search. I hope it's not a lurker or something horrible like that. And I get an old gun. So handgun unreliable adds 1 red dice to ranged attack roll, and it does cause mayhem. Now, I've already got a pretty decent Beretta, so I'm not going to equip that. I'm going to pop that in my pack and take that back to my brother Philip. Hopefully he's happy. So now we move on to the event phase. That caused no noise obviously because I was sneaking. We need to check the kill zones. Again, I'm out of that one. Out of that one too. So we need to check what the event is. And it is Aromas, all quiet and low threat. Move 1 eligible walker towards the nearest survivor. So, obviously again, I don't want to move this one. I definitely don't want to move that one. So I think the most obvious one is actually to move this one here, because it will stop against that barrier. So it's looking pretty good. So we need the end phase now. Obviously all the walkers are still stood up, so we don't need to roll for them. So we're back with turn 4. Turn 4, and it's starting to get very, very claustrophobic for Brian. And this is one of the beauties of the game, is that we're in a situation here where pretty much no matter what I do, I'm going to attract a walker or get too close to a walker. So, unlike last turn when I was admittedly a little bit of a chicken, I'm going to be bold again. I know there's a supply counter behind this barricade here. So again, I'm going to try and run straight past the walker here, leap over that barricade, and then use my next action to grab that supply counter. So, let's start off by running the first part of my run move, and then I need to roll to see if I make it over, and I do, luckily. Again, you'll just have to trust me that I am being honest here, which means I leap over to here. Now that obviously causes noise, and the closest walker to me, which is this one, will shamble 6 inches, but then stop at the barrier. And then for my second action, I get the supply token. And let's check what it is, hope it's something good. Oh yes, 2x4 melee weapon, bludgeon. I may reroll 1 die per melee attack roll, and now that is pretty good. So I'm going to equip that, which will make me pretty handy when it comes to melee. And now we move on to the event phase. Now unfortunately this time there's no escaping from the kill zone, and if you're under the kill zone, the walker, even if they're on the barrier or not on the barrier, they will move straight in, ready for the melee phase. So I'm definitely going to have to do some hand-to-hand in a moment. And then we check the event. The event this time is distracted. So we're on low threat. Move 1 eligible walker in a direction of your choice. Now that is quite good, because I can get one out of the way. So unfortunately, an eligible walker is one that is not in melee, so I can't move that one. That would have been lovely. But I could move this one here, so then I can run towards here. So he's already in base to base with the car, so that means he can shuffle around 6 inches, and I'm going to end up there. So now that walker is out of the way. Next we have the melee phase, so obviously I've got to do a bit of fighting here. Now if there is any melee, the threat goes up by 1, so now up to 5, although we're still in low threat. Now the walker will just roll 1 red dice, because it's not ganging up on me, and Brian will roll 1 white dice. So I'm going to roll them both together. Oh dear. So we've scored 2 for both and a bite for the walker. Now luckily, if there's a draw, the survivor always counts as winning. Otherwise, if the walker had won and I'd rolled less than 2, I would have been bitten. And then if you're bitten, you can potentially take a wound every turn. So thank goodness for that draw, which means that walker is pushed back 1 inch. That was a lucky escape for Brian there. So end phase now, all the walkers are still stood up. Luckily I haven't been bitten, so I don't have to roll to see if I lose a wound. So we're on to turn 5. Turn 5, and I think you'll agree that Brian had a pretty lucky escape there. I thought he was definitely going to get bitten, but he somehow managed to survive. And now, this has freed up this token here quite nice as well. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to get round the barrier. Now what you can do is, if you want to check if a survivor can make it through, this range ruler is exactly the same size as their base. So you can check now. No, he's going to get stuck between there and the walker. So it means again, he's going to have to leap. So far he's been pretty lucky with his leaps. So let's give it a go. So if I can do it, I'm going to leap over and then sneak towards that one. And he does do it. Look, I'm not making this up. He is honestly very, very agile at leaping over things. So he will sneak 4 inches, which does not make a noise. And then his next action is to check that supplies. And this time he gets bandages. So discard this card as an action to restore 1 health point lost earlier in the game. Now luckily, Brian's doing pretty well at the minute, so he doesn't have to use that. And that means I've now collected 4, and the last one is here. So it's looking pretty good if I can get around here and then run off the edge of the board. So a couple more turns and I think I might do it unless something goes terribly wrong. So onto the event phase, we check the kill zones. So I'm not in the kill zone of that one. I'm not in the kill zone of that one. Yeah, obviously those 2 are well out. So now we get an event and it won't stay down. So we're still on low threat. So for each prone walker, roll the sheriff's dice. On a badge, the walker gets up. If there are no prone walkers, which there aren't, add 1 to the threat level. So we're going up to 6. There's no melee this time, and we don't have to do anything on the end phase. So that was a pretty quick turn, and we're straight on to turn 6 in a moment. Turn 6, and I'm not going to lie to you, I must be channeling my inner Brian because I'm feeling pretty cocky about this one. I reckon I'm going to do it. Unless something goes really terribly wrong here, I'm going to be fine. So I just need to collect this last supply token here. Now it would be nice if I could sneak, but I think it's going to be too far. Yeah, it's just out of my sneak. So it does mean I'm going to have to run to it. So I'm going to run to here, which causes noise. And then again, nearest walker will shamble 6 inches. Yeah, so you know when I said I didn't want anything to go wrong, I think this might have just gone wrong, but we'll see. So I've got 1 more action left. So I check this supply token. Now hopefully it's not a lurker, because that would be awful. Oh no, it's a hunting knife. So dual wield sharp adds a red die to melee attack roll, which is pretty handy. Now I've already got the 2x4 equipped, so I'm just going to pop that in my pack. Now we move on to the event phase and check the kill zones. Now this is when I think I may have made a mistake, because I think, yes, I'm going to be in the kill zone of that walker. So he's going to move round and start trying to chomp on Brian. Now we check the events. So it's the hunger, so we automatically add 1 to the threat level. So that's pushing us up to 7, so we're almost at medium, but we're still on low threat. So we move 1 eligible walker towards the nearest survivor. So let's have a look here. So an eligible walker is one that is not in melee and hasn't already moved during the event phase. So I'm going to move this one here because it will just go bang against that barrier and just stay there. So now we're on to the melee phase. and because Brian's engaged in melee, the threat goes up by 1, so we're now on 8. One more and we'll be on medium threat, and obviously things get a lot more tricky when it comes to the events, but we'll see what happens. So again, Brian rolls 1 white dice, the Walker rolls 1 red dice. Now, we've got to hope here that we don't get anything nasty. I'm going to roll them both together. Oh yes, look at that. So the Walker scored 1, Brian scores a pretty sweet headshot. So smash. He gets that 2x4 and lops that Walker's head off. So this now is looking pretty good for the last turn, because hopefully I can just leg it off the board edge and then win. So we just need to check, because it's the end phase. Obviously no one is knocked down, so it means I don't have to roll to see if they stand back up. So let's come back for turn 7 for my victorious run off the board. So it's turn 7, and this is really my kind of victorious sprint off the board. So you may remember the objective for this scenario was to collect the 5 tokens. There's one here, there's one in the car, behind the barrier, on top of the car, and behind this barrier here. So Brian has been pretty efficient, he's collected them all, and now he just needs to get off the board edge here. So I don't need to worry about sneaking. I'm just going to run straight towards the camera. So now you imagine kind of victorious music, probably some explosions maybe going off behind him to make it really dramatic. And that's the end of this scenario. So I won. I did really well, if I do say so myself. So yeah, I'll be back in a minute with a bit of a roundup and a conclusion about that game. So I hope you enjoyed that playthrough of Prelude to Woodbury, just to show you how the solo game works, as well as the kind of the core game, which we've been covering in a lot more detail. So that was part 2 of the Prelude to Woodbury, and there is part 3 as well. I won't spoil the surprise there, but there's a very different mechanic that plays a lot differently to how you've seen the game played before. So in the Prelude to Woodbury you get everything you need to play solo. You get the event cards, you get the threat tracker, so it's almost like another starter set if you just want to play by yourself. Here we were using the kind of cars and the 3D barriers from the Kickstarter, but yeah, you will get the 2D cards and everything you need to play. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that, and we'll be back soon with another playthrough, possibly of me versus Ronnie in the core game. Thanks, and we'll see you next week for another Mantic Weekly. Cheers!